Everyone laughed when the blonde instructor walked into the military training base. They called her Barbie, an Instagram model. But what happened next left the entire unit speechless. Maya Torres looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. Not a shooting range. The soldiers saw perfect makeup, designer clothes, and assumed she was lost. They had no idea they were looking at the most decorated sniper in recent military history. The desert heat shimmered off the asphalt as Maya Torres stepped out of her silver Audi, her designer heels clicking like gunshots against the concrete. Fort Brixton's training compound buzzed with the usual pre-dawn energy. 23 elite recruits preparing for what they thought would be another routine, advanced combat session. Maya looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Blonde hair cascaded in perfect waves past her shoulders. Her makeup was flawless despite the 6 a.m. start time, and her fitted black blazer probably cost more than most soldiers made in 2 months. The only hint of anything military was a subtle tattoo visible on her forearm, numbers that looked like coordinates. An elegant script that the recruits probably assumed was some kind of aesthetic choice. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez was the first to notice her. He elbowed Private Danny Brooks, a cocky kid from Texas who thought 8 weeks of basic training made him God's gift to warfare. "Yo, Brooks, check out the lost civilian." Brooks looked up from cleaning his rifle and let out a low whistle. "Damn, someone's definitely in the wrong place. GPS probably sent her to the base instead of the mall." The laughter started rippling through the group like wildfire. These weren't ordinary recruits, they were hand-picked candidates for special operations. The cream of the crop. Soldiers who'd earned the right to be cocky. And right now, they were all staring at what looked like a supermodel who'd taken a very wrong turn. "Maybe she's here for a photo shoot," suggested Corporal James White, barely suppressing his grin. "You know, support our troops' calendar, or something?" "Nah," Brooks said, standing up and puffing out his chest. "She's probably some politician's daughter on a base tour. Daddy pulled some strings to show her where her tax dollars go." Maya walked across the compound with fluid confidence, her heels somehow navigating the uneven terrain without a single stumble. Every step was precise, controlled, almost predatory, but the recruits were too busy laughing to notice. "Excuse me," Miss Rodriguez called out, his voice dripping with fake helpfulness. "I think you might be lost. The visitor center is back that way, past the I'm exactly where I need to be," Maya interrupted, her voice soft, but carrying an edge that made Rodriguez's joke die in his throat. Brooks stepped forward, his chest puffed out like a peacock, displaying for a mate. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is a restricted military training area. We're about to start advanced combat exercises. It's really not safe for civilians." The group erupted in fresh laughter. Someone in the back shouted, "Instagram influencer." Another voice added, "Better get those selfies quick, before security shows up." Maya reached into her designer handbag, a movement so casual it seemed harmless. But something about it made several soldiers unconsciously step back. She pulled out a military ID and a folded set of orders, handing them to White. "Staff Sergeant Maya Torres," she said simply, "your new instructor." The laughter faltered for exactly 3 seconds. Then Brooks looked at the ID, looked at Maya, and burst into even louder laughter. "Oh, come on. They seriously sent us Barbie to teach advanced combat. What's next?" Rodriguez added, wiping tears from his eyes. "A cooking instructor who looks like Gordon Ramsay. I bet she's never even held a real weapon," Brooks continued, his voice getting louder as he fed off the group's energy. "What's she gonna teach us? How to kill people with her eyelash curler?" The recruits were in full riot mode now, jokes flying like bullets. Tactical mascara application, advanced high-heel combat, how to fight in a push-up bra. Maya stood in the center of the chaos, perfectly still, her blue eyes tracking each face, cataloging each insult. She'd heard it all before, had been hearing variations of the same jokes since she'd enlisted at 18. But these soldiers had no idea what they were dealing with, what they couldn't know. What the perfectly applied makeup and designer clothes hid was that Maya Torres had grown up in hell. Foster care from age 3, bouncing between homes where survival meant being invisible, where being pretty was often a target on your back. She'd learned to fight before she'd learned to apply lipstick, learned to kill before she'd learned to drive. She'd joined the military not out of patriotism, but out of desperation. Was the only family that wouldn't send her away when things got tough. And when the drill sergeants had laughed at the pretty blonde girl with the soft voice, she'd quietly proceeded to break every training record in the book. All right, enough. Sergeant First Class Maria Gonzalez emerged from the equipment shed, her voice cutting through the laughter like a blade. 15 years of military service had given her zero patience for this kind of stupidity. Torres, you ready to begin? Yes, Sergeant, Maya replied, her voice crisp and professional. Gonzalez turned to the recruits. Staff Sergeant Torres is here to run advanced marksmanship and tactical response. You will show her the same respect you'd show any instructor. But, Sarge, Brooks protested, his voice still thick with amusement. She looks like she's afraid of loud noises. How's she supposed to teach us anything about combat? Yeah, Rodriguez added. What's her field experience? Modeling for recruitment. Posters. The group erupted again, and Maya could see Gonzalez's jaw tightening. But before the sergeant could respond, Maya held up one perfectly manicured hand. It's fine, Sergeant Gonzalez, Maya said, her voice still calm. I think a demonstration would be more educational than an argument. She walked to the equipment shed with fluid grace, her heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete. When she emerged, she was carrying something that made the laughter die instantly: a Barrett M82 sniper rifle, a weapon that looked almost comically oversized in her delicate hands. The Barrett wasn't just any rifle. It was a .50 caliber anti-material weapon designed to punch through armor at distances most soldiers could barely see. In the right hands, it was one of the most lethal weapons in the military arsenal. Private Brooks, Maya called out, her voice carrying easily across the suddenly quiet compound. Would you mind setting up targets at the 800-meter line? 800 meters? Brooks's voice cracked slightly. Ma'am, that's cream range. Most snipers work at 300 to 400 meters. 800 is. 800 meters will be fine, Maya replied, checking the rifle scope with movements so fluid they seemed like muscle memory, unless you think it's too challenging. Brooks looked around at his fellow recruits, all of whom were now watching, with interest instead of amusement. He couldn't back down, now not in front of everyone. No, ma'am, I'll set them up. As Brooks jogged toward the distant target line, Maya began her pre-shot routine. She checked the wind, adjusted the scope, and settled into a prone position that transformed her from fashion model to apex predator in seconds. This rifle, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent compound, is the same one I used during Operation Silent Dawn. Have any of you heard of that mission? A few recruits glanced at each other uncertainly. Operation Silent Dawn was legendary in Special Ops, Yakuza, classified hostage rescue that had saved 23 American civilians from a terrorist compound in Syria. The targets that night, Maya continued, weren't paper. They were 3 terrorists in 3 different buildings, holding 23 innocent people. The range was 647 meters. Wind speed was 15 knots and shifting, and I had to make 3 simultaneous shots because anything less than perfect meant those hostages died. She settled into the rifle, her body becoming perfectly still. The first shot had to take out a terrorist holding a dead man's switch. Missed that shot, and the entire compound explodes. The second shot had to neutralize a sniper on the roof who had visual on our rescue team. Missed that, and my teammates die. Maya's finger found the trigger, her breathing becoming slow and controlled. The third shot, she paused, had to save a 6-year-old girl named Amira. She had brown eyes, pigtails, and was wearing a pink dress with flowers. The terrorist was using her as a human shield, holding her against his chest with a gun to her head. The entire compound had fallen dead silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. At 647 meters, with shifting wind, I had to thread a bullet through a gap of less than 2 inches. Miss by even a millimeter, and that little girl dies. Maya's voice was steady, professional, but there was steel underneath. I didn't miss. Crack. The first shot rang out like thunder, the Barrett's massive report echoing across the desert. Before the sound had even finished reverberating, Maya had already adjusted and fired again. Crack. A second later, the third shot followed. Crack. At 800 meters, 3 targets showed perfect center mass hits. Brooks, who had been watching through binoculars, lowered them with shaking hands. Maya stood, brushing dust off her designer jeans with the same casual grace she'd shown walking across the parking lot. The Barrett looked like it weighed nothing in her hands. "Those 3 shots in Syria," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent compound, "saved 23 lives. I was 24 years old, the youngest sniper ever to receive the Presidential Service Badge." She looked around at the group of stunned soldiers. My operational call sign was Angel, not because I looked like one, but because I was the last thing terrorists saw before they went to hell. Private Brooks walked back from the target line on unsteady legs, the destroyed targets clutched in his hands. The perfect bullseyes had been obliterated, replaced by holes large enough to put a fist through. "Ma'am," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. We had no idea. I'm sorry." Maya studied his face, seeing genuine shock and remorse there. "Private Brooks, do you know why I dress like this when I'm off duty?" "No, Mom." "Because looking like a threat gets you noticed. Looking harmless gets you close." She gestured to her appearance. "In the field, enemies see a pretty blonde tourist who's lost. They don't see the weapon until it's too late. Assumptions aren't just stupid, Private. In combat, they're fatal." Sergeant Gonzalez stepped forward, her expression dead serious. "Staff Sergeant Torres has 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Silver Stars, and the Presidential Service Badge. She's completed 40 successful missions across 6 theaters of operation. Most of them are still classified." The recruits listened in absolute silence, their earlier mockery replaced by something approaching awe. "But more importantly," Gonzalez continued, "she volunteered to be here. She could be sitting behind a desk at the Pentagon, but she chose to train the next generation of warriors. Don't waste that opportunity." Maya walked over to her bag and pulled out a small black notebook, its leather cover scarred with burns and scratches. "This contains everything I've learned about staying alive in combat. Every technique, every trick, every hard-earned lesson written in blood." She held it up. "But I only share it with soldiers who understand that war doesn't care what you look like, how old you are, or what anyone assumes about you. War only cares about one thing: can you do the job when lives depend on it?" She opened the notebook, revealing pages filled with handwritten notes, tactical diagrams, wind calculations, and kill confirmations. Page 23 explains how to make a 1,000-meter shot with iron sights. Page 47 details psychological profiling of hostage takers. Page 60-1. She paused, her finger tracing a specific entry. ... contains the coordinates of every successful mission I've ever completed. The recruits leaned forward despite themselves, fascinated by this glimpse into the mind of a true warrior. "You see," Maya said, closing the notebook carefully, "when you grow up unwanted, bouncing between foster homes where you're never safe, you learn to adapt. You learn to read people, to see threats before they see you. You learn that survival depends on being underestimated." She looked directly at Brooks. "I joined the military at 18 because it was the first place that promised me a family that wouldn't abandon me when things got tough. My first drill sergeant took one look at me and said I'd wash out in a week. Maya smiled, but it was sharp as a blade. I finished first in every category: physical fitness, marksmanship, tactical knowledge, combat effectiveness. He stopped making jokes after day 3. She walked closer to the group, her presence somehow filling the space around them. Do you want to know what real combat feels like, Private Brooks? Yes, ma'am. It's lying in the same position for 72 hours, watching through a scope while terrorists torture innocent people, waiting for the perfect moment to save lives. It's making split-second calculations while bullets are flying over your head. It's knowing that 23 families are counting on you to be perfect, because anything less means memorial services instead of homecomings. Maya's voice remained steady, but her eyes had taken on an intensity that made several recruits step back unconsciously. In Syria, I watched through my scope as they brought that little girl to the window. Amira, 6 years old, brown eyes, terrified, but trying to be brave. The terrorist was holding her against his chest, using her as a shield, and I knew I had one shot. One. She held up a single finger. At 647 meters, with a crosswind, through a window, with a moving target and a child's life in the balance. The compound was so quiet, you could hear the desert wind whispering across the sand. The shot had to be perfect. Not good enough, not close perfect. Because perfect was the difference between that little girl going home to her parents and her parents planning a funeral. Maya looked around at each face. That's what real marksmanship means. That's why precision matters. That's why your attitude matters. Because in combat, assumptions don't just hurt feelings, they kill people. Privat Rodriguez, who had been standing in stunned silence, finally found his voice. Ma'am, what happened to the girl? To Amira. Maya's expression softened for just a moment. She's 12 now, lives in Michigan with her aunt and uncle. Wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. She paused. I still get Christmas cards. The emotional weight of that revelation settled over the group like a physical force. This wasn't just about military training anymore. This was about real people, real lives, real consequences. Tomorrow we start at 050, Maya announced, her voice returning to its professional tone. Bring everything you think you know about combat, because I'm going to tear it apart and rebuild it properly. We'll cover advanced marksmanship, tactical movement, threat assessment, and psychological warfare. And when I'm done with you, you'll be the kind of soldiers who save lives instead of making assumptions. She slung the Barrett over her shoulder with casual ease, the massive weapon looking almost natural in her hands. Oh, and one more thing. These coordinates on my arm. She pushed up her sleeve, revealing the elegant script numbers the recruits had dismissed as decoration. They marked the exact location where Operation Silent Dawn took place. I got this tattoo the day after the mission, because some things you never forget. As Maya walked back toward her car, her heels clicking rhythmically on the asphalt, every soldier on that compound watched her go with a mixture of respect, awe, and more than a little fear. This wasn't just an instructor, this was a living legend, a warrior who had earned the right to wear designer clothes and perfect makeup because she'd proven herself in the most demanding arena imaginable. Private Brooks turned to Rodriguez, his face pale. Dude, we really screwed up. Yeah, Rodriguez whispered. But I think we just got the best teacher we could ever ask for. Sergeant Gonzalez gathered the recruits around her. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Never, ever judge a warrior by their appearance. Staff Sergeant Torres could have had any assignment in the military. Pentagon desk job, teaching at West Point, consulting for defense contractors. She chose to be here, in the desert, training smart-ass recruits who think they know everything. Her voice hardened. Don't waste this opportunity. That evening, word spread through the base like wildfire. The new instructor, who looked like a supermodel, but shot like the angel of death, By morning, other units were requesting transfers to Maya's program. Senior officers were pulling strings to observe her training sessions. The base commander himself had added Maya's classes to his calendar. And Maya Torres, the girl who had learned to survive by being underestimated, settled in for another mission, creating the kind of soldiers who understood that strength comes in many forms. Respect is earned through action, and the most dangerous weapon in any arsenal is the mind of a warrior who refuses to be defined by other people's assumptions. The next morning, every recruit was early, every joke had been forgotten, and everyone was ready to learn from the most lethal angel the military had ever trained. Because sometimes the best teachers are the ones who remind you that appearances can be deceiving, assumptions can be deadly, and real warriors come in all shapes, sizes, and designer heels. And sometimes, when you're lucky enough to train under a legend, you learn that the difference between life and death isn't how you look, it's how well you can do the job when everything depends on it.